Hey, this is April, and this show, SetSet Show, discusses cannabis, psychedelics, and altered states of consciousness generally. It's intended for audiences 21 and over. Also, I am not a medical expert. If you are looking to engage with psychedelic substances, please consult your physician before doing so. Hi, I'm April Pride, founder of SetSet, a resource for everyone to safely explore the use of cannabis and psychedelics and learn more about their therapeutic potential. Today I'm joined by Christian Rasmussen to dive into the often misunderstood world of Amanita Muscaria, which is a large red spotted mushroom. It's cartoon-like. Christian shares his personal journey from addiction to healing, how Amanita Muscaria became a vital part of his path to recovery and resilience after benzo dependency. We discuss how Amanita Muscaria can be used responsibly, its unique effects compared to psilocybin, and how it can support those struggling with addiction. And if you're ready to dive deeper into the world of fungi, be sure to check out SetSet's Ultimate Psilocybin Guide, a comprehensive resource that's clinician-backed and available in PDF and audio, and covers candidate criteria, dosing, methods of administration, contraindications, history, science, and more. Join us as we uncover the potential of Amanita Muscaria in a new light.
With Christian Rasmussen, what would you call yourself? You don't grow what you sell. You're a retailer, you're a purveyor. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been hitting the term merchants, which I like just because it's all encompassing. So we're the largest Amanita merchants in the country, potentially the world. That's hard to quantify, definitely in the country though.
Okay. You're a merchant.
Retailer, wholesaler, importer. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I have so many questions. So Amanita, you hit on the nature that we're here to talk about, I think primarily because it is something that has come up in my own work. And I have a lot of conflicting information that I've heard, right? So to
Right.
set the story straight, Amanita
Yeah.
muscaria is a mushroom. And I live in Seattle, and they all have been all over my neighborhood this summer. And I'll see people, they're beautiful, but
They are.
they're also poisonous.
Debatable. So Amanita muscaria is the typical fairy tale mushroom. It's the Mario mushroom. It's the Alice in Wonderland mushroom. It's the mushroom emoji on your phone. It's the red cap with white dots on it. They've gotten a bad rap over the years because they are toxic if you eat them raw, fresh out of the ground. So if you pick an Amanita mushroom and eat the cap, most people are going to get really sick. When you dry it properly, it largely mitigates that risk. And then with a little bit of further preparation, which is super easy, you can completely negate that risk. It really would just make people really sick if they don't prepare it properly. A lot of the other stories about it being dangerous are from 70s, 80s, 90s, people wanting to consume it for a psychedelic experience, and they don't prepare it properly and they eat a really large amount of it and have a bad experience. It's like the way I equate it to, if you're a 16-year-old and you want to have your first drink and you down a bottle of vodka, you're going to get really sick. It's not going to be a good experience. So similar to that, where it's a constant uphill battle for us to work our way around those, but it's a really worthy mission to be on.
So how did that mission begin for you?
So I've always struggled with addiction issues. Through my teen years, I went to treatment a couple of times. Through my 20s, I got addicted to opiates and a whole plethora of other substances. I was a garbage pail. That's how I look at it at this point. I was always running from something, or I was always trying to fill this void that I had that was really spiritual in nature. And I've been in business my whole life. I got into real estate. I went to college for physics for a year, and then I wanted to become a theoretical physicist, dealing with quantum mechanics and tying in the Eastern philosophy into quantum mechanics, so on and so forth. But so I got into real estate. I got addicted to benzodiazepines while I was in real estate, as well as opiates and other substances. But benzos are typical anti-anxiety medication. We're talking Valium, Klonopin, Ativan, so on and so forth. They're debatably the hardest drugs to get off of in the world. Like worse than, I would get off of opiates 5 times in a row before getting off of benzos again. It was truly awful. Some people equate it to the worst experience a human being can have aside from being tortured. While I was going through this, I would literally say to my wife at the time, I would rather be strapped to a chair and physically tortured for a month straight than have to go through this. It was complete mental torture, which I can handle physical pain pretty well, but the mental torture can get really tricky and difficult. So I was off all substances at this point. Benzos were the last thing that I decided to get off of. I would be trying to design the website, and within 5 minutes, I would get so flustered and flushed and crying. It was very intense. So I was a year off of benzos, actually to the day. I'm still extraordinarily sick. Felt like I healed 5-10% maybe in that year. So I was on a hike and I found these mushrooms growing, and they were the magical fairy tale mushrooms, fairy rings. And there was this unbelievably strong magnetic heart pull to them, something that I'd experienced a lot in the past with things like psilocybin or ayahuasca or whatever it may be. But this was the strongest pull I'd ever experienced. In that, there was this informational download in a sense where I knew that they were not only going to help me, but they were going to play a big role in my life. And I was supposed to play a big role in their mission. That wasn't necessarily as conscious at the time, but looking back on it, that information was for sure there. So I picked them and I went up to the house and I did some research, and there was nothing online except for I ate 20 grams and had a horrible experience, or they're poisonous, they're toxic, don't touch them. Back to the misconceptions. And then there was one woman online named Amanita Dreamer. That was her pseudonym or YouTube channel. And she claimed that she used Amanita to heal her brain getting off benzodiazepines. And she broke down the science of it, which I then delved into quite a bit and found out that Amanita hits the GABA system and the glutamate system, which are the two systems that benzodiazepines damage. It hits GABA in a very unique way, where it directly binds to the GABA A receptors as opposed to some sort of subunit similar to like benzodiazepines. And in doing so, it's not addictive. There's no tolerance formation, or maybe very slight. There's no withdrawal. So it's potentially a really good candidate to get off of alcohol, benzodiazepines, barbiturates, anything that affects the GABA system. And within 2 weeks of microdosing, it felt like I healed 80 to 90%, which was miraculous. Like it gave me life. It was like I was suffocating. I was drowning. All of a sudden I could breathe again. It was unbelievable. So I reached out to Amanita. I had this cannabis company, so I sponsored one of her videos, which did really well and did well for the both of us. And then she asked me to start selling in the States because nobody was doing it. So it wasn't something that I reached for or grabbed for. It just fell into my lap. And yeah, we're the first to start selling in the States. There's a lot of smaller people that have popped up now. As I mentioned, we're definitely the largest here in the country, and we're debatably the largest in the world. And it's really like, for me, it's not a business as much as a mission. And the goal is to help as many people as we possibly can. That's a quick synopsis of the story.
And I want to ask you a couple of questions, but first I just want to back up. So the name of your company is MN, as in Minnesota, Nice Ethnobotanicals, right?
Yeah.
So the nice part, I love that you put the nice in there. So what's that about?
So Minnesota nice is a phrase here in Minnesota. People are generally nice. Honestly, sometimes it's more Minnesota passive aggressive. Minnesota nice is definitely a phrase. So it was actually, when I started the cannabis company, it was Minnesota Nice Botanicals. And my business partner at the time wanted to use that name, and I was totally okay with that. But it's become such like an interesting staple, like in the community that we've built and we're part of. It's a really well recognized name, which I think is, but yeah, it works. We're nice people and we're doing nice things.
So we have the Seattle Freeze, which is not such a passive way to describe the passive aggressive nature of what's going to happen here. So I can appreciate the Minnesota Nice.
Yeah.
There was something that I want to talk about benzos. So when I was first reading about your story, benzodiazepines. Diazepines.
That's easy.
A couple of years. And that is that women are being prescribed benzos at a much, much higher rate than men. And they're typically being prescribed them by general practitioners who are men and who do not have mental health training. And then I also found out I had not heard the extent to which the withdrawal is that you just described.
Yeah.
But I know it's not, nothing's easy and they make everything feel better. So why are you not just going to grab that or grab what have my peers certainly have a relationship with Xanax, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like when I was doing my research on benzos, it said that it's very likely that this is like an underground or an underreported dependency, and that
Right.
it has the potential to be just as bad as the opioid epidemic because they
For
are being
sure.
prescribed at such a great rate. There was a guy that was trying to come off of Xanax, and he was talking about titrating off and trying to do it in a careful, responsible way. And it was a very difficult
Yeah.
documentary to watch because I had
Yeah.
no idea how much people were suffering trying to figure out how to not, yeah, take these
Yeah.
medications. So thank you for providing
For
not
sure.
only this medicine, but also your story because there's so much shame around addiction and substance
Yeah.
use. People just need to know that there are options, I think.
Yeah. It wasn't a known option when I was going through it, but
Sure.
it's hands down the best option that the world has to offer. We've worked with tens of thousands of people. Some of the stories that we hear, it seems to basically help everybody, and to see that impact and the way that people are able to transform or come back into themselves after dealing with years and years of this awful struggle. It's really miraculous and it's really powerful. And yeah, to touch on the benzo epidemic, it's absolutely as pervasive, maybe even more than the opioid epidemic. The thing is, it's not killing people unless they commit suicide trying to get off of them. And that's a really prevalent aspect to this because it's literal torture and it lasts for forever. But it's not, people are overdosing left and right. So it's vastly underreported. I have a cousin who produced the film Medicating Normal. I think it's on Gaia TV now. It was picked up by PBS in the beginning, but she's very involved in this, and it's all about benzos and getting off benzos. And she
Mhm.
follows 4 or 5 people around her, the film crew does, and it goes through their journey. And it's super difficult to watch. There are some aspects of it that resonate so big with me. I couldn't cut down by a quarter of a pill, weigh the pill in milligrams and shave off just like the slightest amount. And even then I would be super sick for weeks or months. There was a part where one of the guys in the film says he's with his wife and he's talking to the camera crew. And I know I love her. I know how much I love her, but I haven't felt love for her. And that hits me hard because that's how I felt. There was zero, like, it's so hard to imagine what the world would be like with zero love. Like, you can't feel love internally, externally. It's just completely zapped. Like, love drives everything. And yeah, it's a really awful, existence to live in. And if we can do anything to help people through that dark tunnel, I want to do whatever I can.
What does that protocol look like when someone decides, I don't want to take this medicine anymore, right? It stops serving me. Let's just, you get to that point, right?
Yeah.
So can you immediately swap out Amanita Muscaria? What does that look like for someone?
It's tricky in my situation because we have to dance in the FDA blanket, basically. What we did was a rapid phenobarbital taper, where for 3 days you take phenobarbital instead of your benzos, and that stops you from going into seizures and dying. And
Okay.
then after that, it's just, okay, have at it. And you got to deal with the withdrawal for a long time. Most people are in the process of tapering. And by the way, I do not recommend the phenobarbital taper. I think that was
Oh,
probably one of
okay.
the worst ways I could have gone about it. It seemed to exacerbate the brain damage that, 'cause it's not withdrawal at that point. You're literally dealing with brain damage. And it seemed to exacerbate that. Might work for other people, but the best way generally to go about it is by microdosing consistently. Unlike psilocybin mushrooms, for instance, you take one dose every 2 or 3 days. You need to reset the tolerance receptors. Amanita is different. It works the best when it's taken consistently. So somebody will take something like a capsule or a gummy or a very small amount of powder of the mushroom, and they'll take that half gram or so 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, evening, consistently for the entirety of their taper until they're feeling better. That could be, for some people, it could be months. Some people will take it for a year or two at a time. One of the beautiful things, as I mentioned before, is we haven't really noticed any tolerance at all, particularly when taken at those levels. If somebody's taking really large doses, they might find it gets less effective, but in those low microdose levels, tolerance doesn't seem to develop. Let's say they're on 2 milligrams of Xanax a day. They'll start taking the Amanita with that and then just titrating down maybe a little quicker than they would otherwise. And people generally find that they're able to titrate down with 0 to minimal pain, which is massive considering how hard it is. Or if they're already off of it, they've been off of it for a few months, they're still dealing with the brain damage. People generally will find that they're coming back into themselves, that heightened terror and anxiety completely starts dissipating. There's not really a set protocol as of now, but generally microdosing consistently. When I was off of it and found Amanita, I microdosed 3 times a day, about a half gram to a gram. And then I would do a larger dose every week or so. And that's 5 or 6 grams. It's still not like a super large dose. Those seem to really reset my system, where after these experiences, I would find if microdosing was slowly bringing me up after these experiences, I was jumped up considerably higher, back to myself.
So you were nice enough to share some product with me. So this is what the dried Amanita muscaria packaging from NN nice looks like. Okay. This is 15 grams. So you're saying a half a gram to a full gram, and then take 5 or 6 grams. When you're taking 5 or 6 grams, are you putting it in a tea?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
and the tea protocol, this is a good thing to note. So like I mentioned earlier, with proper drying, it mitigates a lot of the risk for nausea. If one is taking small amounts, but if somebody's taking 5 or 6 grams, that the nausea can come up unless they prepare it further. And to do that, you brew a tea. It's super easy. You use heat and acidity to decarboxylate or convert one of the compounds into another. So you put 5 grams in a pot of water, add some lemon juice, boil for 20 minutes, strain, drink, good to go.
Yeah. That's the same recommendation with psilocybin mushrooms too.
Yeah.
Lemon tea.
Yep. Basically, although we use the boiling, the heat is a big
Mhm.
aspect of this, where I think with
Okay.
lemon tech, you don't utilize that. So you really need the heat and the acidity to really get the job done.
Okay. What are some of the other conditions or reasons that people are seeking out, or maybe they don't know, but they could use Amanita muscaria for?
I think the biggest one is anxiety, anxiety and insomnia. I mean, it gets the GABA system just like alcohol or anti-anxiety medications. So there's like a lowering of inhibitions, there's an increasing in sociability, a relaxation, and opening up of oneself. And it does this all without dumbing or numbing or taking one out of themselves. It's also a potent nootropic. So it hits the cholinergic system very similarly to a lot of the smart drugs out there. So there's
Mhm.
like an increase in memory recall or verbal fluency, or people can get in this flow state a little bit better. And then it's also adaptogenic in the sense that if you take it earlier in the day, you might get more focused and more energy. If you're at work, if you take it at night, you might get more relaxed and ready for sleep. But yeah, I
Okay.
would say anxiety, insomnia are the biggest ones. There's a whole host of various physical ailments or issues that people have found it works really well for. We found with a lot of people, things like Parkinson's, it has completely stopped people's tremors, or Lyme disease. We've had a lot of reports of people saying like it maybe didn't completely cure, but if they take it relatively consistently, they're symptom free. So there's a lot of interesting anecdotes like that we've gathered. And then the other reason that I think is really in line with where I'm at is the spiritual connection and the connection to one's like true self and the healing
Self.
of these like deep inner trauma. So psilocybin and an ayahuasca, it works on the subconscious and unconscious a little bit, but it's really conscious mind. And if you want to work through some stuff on psilocybin, for instance, like you got to dance through the symbolic display of your demons and your darkness. It can be really hard. And that's where bad trips
Totally.
come from and stuff like that.
Yes.
So with Amanita, it does all that work, largely all of it behind the scenes. It does it unconsciously. So a lot of people will find that like one day they're just a little bit different and they can't figure it out initially, but maybe a few weeks go by and they remember something that happened in their childhood and they're like, oh, that doesn't affect me at all anymore. I think one of my favorite stories that I like to tell is in the beginning days when we first started this, and I was hosting these monthly Zoom meetings with people that were experimenting and trying to figure out what worked and what didn't. And we had a
Yep.
woman come on about 2 weeks into her month-long microdose protocol. And she
Mhm.
was like, "Hi, Christian, I'm not sure what's going on. I feel like I'm a little more relaxed and less reactionary, but I don't quite get it yet." I talked for a little bit and gave her some pointers. And it was a month later that she came back on the meeting, and she was 2 weeks off of her protocol. And she was just lit up and very excited. And she's like, I figured it out. I figured out what's been going on. I was like, yeah, what's going on? She said, that inner critic, that
Mhm.
self-deprecating voice has been gone since a week after I started, and it hasn't come back yet at all. it's a beautiful thing to happen, but it's also indicative of a lot of people aren't watching their thought processes. We can feel like the reactions that we get, physical, somatic reactions. But a lot of these changes happen very subtly and that have a profound impact over time. One of the best ways to really gauge what's happening is to get in tune with your thoughts and in tune with yourself and in tune with your energy. And in that sense, it's also a really wonderful teacher to teach one to be more aware of the inner.
It's really an interesting time for the world to be reminded that this is a resource for them, right? Particularly youth who are experiencing higher rates of anxiety and unfortunately suicide. What is the recommendation? I'm a mom. I have two boys that are in high school,
Yeah.
and I am curious, can they take something like this? Can I make them a tea?
Yeah.
Oh,
Things
trust me, but I have psilocybin that I microdose that.
little, yeah, it's a little more lenient with this. There's no regulatory, but I can't go recommending anything.
Yeah,
But that being
I got
said, I
you.
do know a handful of people. I know a lot of people actually that have sworn by it. I know people that have given it to babies in really small doses and no data. We have no idea what it could be doing, but from the stories that I've heard, it seems relatively effective. I think from my own personal experience, like I was using substances at 16, 17 very heavily. If I had something like this, I probably wouldn't have gone down those roads that I went down. I don't know. I would love to get some data on it at some point.
So what do you think it is about us humans that we've got to go through the like challenging experience and see our demons and confront them to get to the same outcome that we may not know we're seeking, but just this inner calmness and inner peace when we can use something like Amanita and we can spare ourselves that additional trauma, really? What is it? Why do we have to go through this obstacle course?
It's an interesting question. I think that we all come into this life with a set of ideas and lessons that we're intending to learn. I feel like we all have these bases of root systems that we come into this life with. And part of uprooting that root system and getting it out, it needs to grow and take hold in the soil before we can recognize it fully. I feel like maybe if I hadn't have gone through what I went through as a kid and in my 20s, those root systems or those little nubs, those little balls of darkness would still be there. And maybe Amanita wouldn't, I don't know. It's hard to say if Amanita would have dealt with it, but I think in my instance, I've needed to allow those roots to not only grow, but to lash out at me and the people that I love so that I could really see them and recognize them so that I could uproot them and shine the light where they once stood. So I don't know, but I think we all have these goals and ambitions and lessons that we're intending to learn in our life. And I think that, yeah, it's almost a necessity, at least in this paradigm that we're in, to allow those to develop so that we can heal them. And unfortunately, most people don't. They just allow them to keep rooting and keep lashing out at people. But yeah, it's an interesting question. I wonder if taking something like this early on in my life would have uprooted those tiny nubs before they took hold. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on, I think teenagers just want to try anything that's going to take
Yeah.
them to the limit, right?
Yeah.
So there's that curiosity that males in particular are really seeking.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yes, but I think that I don't know how old you are. I'm in my late 40s, and there was no dialogue around how we're feeling and the state of our mental
Yes.
health, right? When I was in high school. But the kids today, they know how to use their words, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they'll come to you and say, maybe no one's going to, my boys are not going to come to me, but I know I can bring it up with them
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
they'll, oh, mom. And so they're open to feeling different than how they're feeling that's not making them feel good. They do
Yeah.
want that to go away. I think that these tools are something that maybe young children or younger people are more receptive to
Sure.
because they already suffer from so much anxiety. The last thing they want to do is get on a rocket ship and go to the moon, right? That
Sure.
makes sense. Okay, so this, Amanita, this is only one thing that you have on your website
Mhm.
that people can legally purchase and start to use as a tool to help them feel better in a variety of ways. So Blue Lotus is another one, and that is, I have an extract from you.
Nice.
I
Yeah.
haven't opened any of these because I wanted to hear from you how I should be
Right.
using these. So, Blue Lotus, what is someone seeking that would make them choose this particular piece of nature?
It's got a different resonance. So a lot of the effects are somewhat similar to Amanita. Amanita is the king. So Amanita is the top dog with all these. But Blue Lotus is interesting. Blue Lotus was the most revered psychoactive plant by the ancient Egyptians. And I think personally that, and from my own experience and from a lot of the anecdotes that we've collected, a lot of these medicines, well, particularly Blue Lotus and Amanita, are very energetic medicines. And in that sense, a lot of us in this physical, super tapped in, like channeling entities and like doing energy work, like it's maybe more subtle. But I have some friends that are really tapped in. Blue Lotus is profoundly psychedelic for them. Where for most people, it's not. Blue Lotus is an ornergen, which means it's a dream enhancer. So people will use it for lucid dreaming. It also has a subtle euphoric body load to it. It has a relaxing quality. It opens one up, and then it's a heart opener, which is the most unique aspect of it. That Amanita opens the heart too. I feel like Amanita, it's red and white. So there's like the red chakra, the crown chakra. It seems to get everything in between. Blue Lotus seems to focus on the heart and the throat. So your expressive nature, and then your love and your empathy. So we found that people that take Blue Lotus consistently, anecdotally, we've been told, I've experienced this myself, people's hearts will open, which is super needed in this world right now. So for me personally, that's the most unique and cool aspect of Blue Lotus. But then it also has a really synergistic quality with it. So if somebody smokes cannabis or takes psilocybin, it seems in conjunction with these, it seems to create a whole new experience, which is, yeah, really unique
Okay.
to Blue Lotus. Yeah.
Oh, fascinating. Okay. So this is 10 grams of powdered extract. So give me some doses
Yeah.
and how one would consume this. I guess tea again.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's a 10-to-1 extract, meaning 10 grams of the flower goes into 1 gram of the extract. Most
Okay.
people will brew it into tea. We sell gummies and capsules online too.
The extract is the most economic.
So yeah, the raw material is considerably cheaper per
Mhm.
dose, but most people will take anywhere from 200 milligrams to a gram, which would be maybe like a quarter teaspoon or so. Hard to say for sure. And they'll just mix it in hot water and drink it down. It's really pleasant tasting. It's florally. It's wonderful brew to drink, and then it has nice, pleasant effects as well. Blue
Yeah.
Lotus is pretty subtle. And Amanita can be too, unless you get into really high doses. But for super energetically tapped in people, it can be very profound. For most people, it's pretty subtle, but it's really enjoyable into that space.
So I have a jeweler scale, right? Because I weigh out mushrooms, and that's
Yeah.
what I would use to measure out 100 milligrams.
I would probably start with a half gram. I think most people will take 1 to 4 gummies. So anywhere from 300 milligrams to 1.2 grams. It seems
Mhm.
to have diminishing returns after 2 grams for me, at least. So like 4 grams isn't twice as strong as 2 grams.
So you said that Amanita it activates the GABA system.
Mhm.
What about Blue Lotus?
Blue Lotus hits a lot of different systems, actually. It's really interesting. It hits the serotonin system. It hits it hits a lot of systems. Amanita does too, though. It hits the cholinergic system, the glutamate system, the cannabinoid system, the serotonin system. So they're plants have generally a lot of wide pharmacological action compared to our single bullet drugs that hit one specific system.
Totally. That's interesting that the Amanita hits the glutamate system. I work in psychedelics, so ketamine is in that
Mhm.
category.
Yeah.
Ketamine also activates the glutamate system. And when I started researching it, I have a diagnosis of ADHD. I was like, why, when I sit at my desk after I was very surprised the next day how focused I was,
Mhm.
how at ease I was with my work. And when I started to dig into that a little bit, it had everything to do with the repair that was happening, the
Yeah.
glutamate system. I'm interested in Amanita. I've been
Sure.
taking it for 10
Yeah.
years now. And I'm wondering if that's a report that you've gotten back.
100%. And it's
Okay.
interesting too, like the glutamate system it ties in a lot to like neurogenesis, neuroplasticity. You mentioned repair, and it's like, that's what seems to go on. So another use that people really find Amanita helpful for is for ADD and ADHD, but it's not just while you're on it or in the afterglow of it. It seems to rewire things. So it's like more of a consistent thing, which is really beautiful and powerful and so different than typical pharmaceutical drugs that like while you're on it, it's helpful, but when you're off, it's considerably worse because you damage your receptor sites. And yeah, it actually works very similarly to ketamine, ibotenic acid, and in large doses. We're talking like I mentioned 7 grams is the more medium dose. Large doses are like 10, 15 grams plus. And in those spaces, it has a very reminiscent feeling to medium doses of ketamine. So there's a dissociative feel to it.
Okay.
That was great.
Yeah, kava is great, but I only know it as something that can help me relax. What can you
Yeah.
tell me about kava?
So kava, it's like a South Pacific drink, and they'll brew the root system up and they'll drink it at ceremonies or rituals or, meetings between island chiefs, and they use it in place of alcohol. So it's an inebriant in that sense. I think the use case is much more for anxiety, sociability, sleep, things of that nature. But then it has this unique aspect of it where it can make one feel drunk and silly, which is why there's thousands of kava bars popping up all around the country, which is a fantastic alternative to alcohol.
Yeah.
Some people will find that kava works a lot better for their anxiety than it does. So it's just another option, but it has a very distinct, different feeling to it as well for connoisseurs like myself or anybody that's really interested in altering their chemistry or exploring outer realms of the human psyche. It's a great thing to experiment with. I think Amanita is the top seller for us, and then Blue Lotus, and then probably kava.
So I was just checking because on your website, when you're describing these things, I'm struck by the fact you don't carry.
No.
No.
I do.
Can you explain why?
Yeah, for sure. So I used kratom to get off of hard opiates in my 20s, and it saved my life. Like it really did. I likely wouldn't be here right now, so it wasn't for it. So wonderful plant. I also got extremely addicted to it, like taking copious amounts of it, and getting off of that was just as hard, if not harder than getting off of harder opiates, because it hits a whole plethora of different receptor sites in the brain. It was really difficult. However, it's held a dear place in my heart because it literally did save my life. I was asked time and time again in the early days to start carrying it. And I was always, I don't want to carry something that's addicting, but then there's also the risk of a 60-year-old woman that purchases from Kentucky who has pain and doesn't realize it's addicting. And then all of a sudden is addicted to something. Like that's a risk that I wasn't really willing to take. More recently, we had a bunch of stories across my radar of people really needing help. So about 4 months ago, we opened up our Kratom website. I wanted to keep it off of my current website because I don't want people that are not familiar with it getting addicted to it. So we do have a Kratom website. We have some of the best Kratom on the market, some of the greatest prices, but it's not something that I market much. And then it's really just for people that really need it and find it. I feel like if somebody finds it on their own, there's maybe like an energetic transfer there that isn't quite there if it's just marketed all over the website that I carry or that I have. I'm happy that we opened it up, but I also have all over the website, this is addicting. Please be careful. This is what you can do to avoid addiction. Or there's resources for people to get off of Kratom, which there's some really, or opiates in general, there's some really wonderful tools that people just don't know about that actually work extremely well. That's a big part of it as well. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it if I didn't have all of that information and those disclaimers all over the website.
Yeah. The reason I asked is because I know it's addictive, and I watched my friends who didn't have opioid disorder before have to figure out how they're going to go to Thailand for vacation with their family and come off of Kratom because they can't travel with it. And
Yep.
so not seeing it on your website, I assumed that you're an addict, and why would you put that on your website? So none of this stuff is habit forming in a way that can be detrimental.
Habit forming is anything can be habit forming, but yeah, physically addicting. Nothing that we carry is, again, anything can be very slightly physically addicting and not have that issue. We carry lemon balm, which is the GABA system.
Yeah. And I apologize too. I didn't mean to call you an addict. I shouldn't have said that. I too suffer from substance use. Okay. All right. And then these are the capsule form of this. Those are my last products. Yeah. Nice. Okay. 500 milligrams. I've learned so much. I could sit on the phone and just go through or sit on the Zoom and go through your entire product list. And perhaps we'll have a follow-up call because I do think what you're doing is really important. The more I've been in focused on the psychedelic space for 3.5 years prior to that, I too was working in cannabis. And I watch people try to find, they're seeking something that can give them the answer. And so my work is really focused on integration. And I wonder if integration and integrative practices can absolutely be used when using these medicines too. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. That is profound. Anything else is there anything that you would like to add that we haven't discussed? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for being one of those people that's making sure that we do know that this is a resource. Yeah. Really nice to know you, Christian. Yeah, of course. Where can people find you? And Minnesota. Yeah, we'll do a follow up after all this. Bye bye. Yeah. Thank you for joining us for today's show. I'm April, and I'll be back the next installment of SetSet Show, where we cover everything you need to have a safe, supported psychedelic experience in the wild.